On Christmas night, millionaire Adrian Whitmore stood frozen in the doorway of his mansion, a crumpled piece of paper in his hand. Watching his employee Claire Dawson pull little Noah into her arms, like that hug was the last thing holding the boy together. Snow fell outside. The tree glowed behind them. Everything looked perfect, and still, the scene felt like goodbye. What Adrian didn't know yet was that there was something inside that hug, and inside that piece of paper, that he wasn't ready to face. Claire Dawson pushed the cleaning cart down the main hallway of the Whitmore mansion like she was pushing a decision she didn't really want to make. Outside, snow fell softly over Lake Forest, Illinois, and the Christmas lights on the pines in the garden looked far too pretty for what she felt inside. The whole house smelled like pine, cinnamon, old money, thick carpets, huge paintings, expensive silence. But for Claire, that silence had another name. It felt like trying to breathe with a weight on her chest. The same feeling she'd had when her world collapsed and nobody could hold it up. She slipped her hand into the pocket of her apron and felt the folded resignation letter, the paper already wrinkled from how many times she'd gripped and released it that day. The problem wasn't the job. It was the boy. Noah Whitmore, 5 years old, eyes too big for such a small face, and a silence that seemed to fill the entire house. Ever since his mother died, he hadn't spoken. And worse than the silence was the way he looked. It wasn't regular kid curiosity. It was a locked, careful gaze, like he was afraid to make a sound and lose someone else. Claire kept telling herself he was just another kid in another house, just another floor to mop, another window to shine. But her body didn't buy it, because every time Noah appeared at the end of the hallway, barefoot, holding a worn stuffed animal, she didn't see Noah. She saw Ben, her son. The hospital room, the pneumonia that came too fast and took everything before she had time to understand. She had promised herself she would never go through that again. It wasn't drama. It wasn't weakness. It was survival. Claire had already learned, the hardest way, that her heart can get tired of being punched. So that Christmas, while the rest of the house prepared for a picture-perfect night, she chose the opposite. Leave before the memories turned into a bottomless pit. She thought about the late rent, the night bus, the small apartment where no one would cry on her shoulder. I just need to go, she repeated in her head, trying to turn guilt into courage. But deep down she knew, it wasn't Noah that hurt. It was what he woke up inside her. When Claire climbed the last flight of stairs to drop a box of rags in the upstairs supply closet, she noticed the plane door hovering. Inside, Noah sat on the rug, surrounded by puzzle pieces scattered like crumbs of something still trying to come together. He didn't ask for help. He never did. He just lifted one piece, looked at her for a full second, and slid that little piece toward her, slowly, like a wordless invitation or a silent test. And that was when the letter in her pocket suddenly felt twice as heavy. Because in that tiny, quiet gesture, the boy had just grabbed the part of her she most wanted to keep hidden. Claire stayed frozen in the doorway for a moment, one hand still on the frame, like there was some invisible field pulling her into that little room. The heater blew warm air that smelled like varnished wood and hot chocolate drifting in from the kitchen. Noah didn't speak. Of course he didn't. But he also didn't look away. He nudged another piece toward her, a little blue one with a white edge, one of those pieces that looks useless until you find the right corner. Without even realizing it, Claire slowly knelt on the rug, like someone stepping back into a scene she swore she'd never relive. The puzzle showed a lighthouse on the edge of the sea, waves crashing against the rocks under a pale gray sky, almost the same color as the snow outside. Noah organized the pieces by color, way too methodical for such a small kid, like it was the only thing he could control in that huge house. Claire started to help without invading his space. She picked out the edges, lined them up, and let him decide where each one went. Sometimes their fingers brushed by accident and Noah didn't pull away. He just held his breath for half a second. Like that tiny touch might wake up a dangerous memory. The silence between them wasn't empty. It had the sound of cardboard sliding on carpet, a distant ticking clock, wind tapping softly at the tall windows. Claire noticed Noah had a habit. Every time a piece finally clicked into place, he pressed his lips together and let the air out through his nose, a tiny sigh of relief. And that cracked wall inside her. Ben had done the same thing whenever he managed to tie his shoes by himself. Claire swallowed hard, blinked first so her eyes wouldn't fill in front of the boy, and whispered, careful not to scare the moment away. Nice job. You found the right spot. Noah didn't answer, but he pushed another piece toward her, this time an important one with the top of the lighthouse on it. It was his way of saying, stay. If you love stories where one small gesture changes everything, this is the kind of moment that does it. There are so many people walking around carrying pain in silence, and scenes like this remind us of how much can still be rebuilt. Claire took the piece, fit it gently into the puzzle, and Noah watched like he was seeing a promise being kept. In the reflection on the glass door, Claire caught a shadow standing out in the hall, and the cold gleam of a gaze that had nothing to do with the Christmas spirit. By the time she turned her head, the corridor was empty again. Spotless hallway, polished floor, and the strong feeling that someone had just understood that scene in the worst possible way. Adrian Whitmore was the kind of man the world liked to call and shaky, owner of a massive investment empire. His name on buildings, people saying yes, sir, all day long. But inside his own house, he walked like every step might break something. Since his wife died, the mansion had stayed beautiful and hollow at the same time. And Noah had become the center of a pain Adrian didn't know how to fix. He tried to buy quiet with comfort, expensive toys, therapists, doctors, perfect routines, and still, his son stayed locked in a silence that made the house feel bigger and colder. Into that scene stepped Sloane Caldwell, elegant, polished, positioned by everyone as the next Mrs. Whitmore. She knew how to own a room, how to smile at the perfect moment, how to touch Adrian's arm like she was saying, I'm here. What she really wanted was to belong to that house in a permanent way, with a set place, with automatic respect, with real authority. And Noah never gave her that. The boy didn't react to her perfume, to the high-end gifts wrapped with perfect bows, to her rehearsed sweet tone. It was like he saw straight through her, like nothing she did reached the broken place inside him. When Sloane watched from a distance and saw Claire on the rug helping Noah with the puzzle, something hardened inside her. It wasn't just jealousy. It was the fear of losing ground. The boy who spent days without showing anything was quiet in a different way. And Claire wasn't trying to be noticed. She was just there, patient, respecting his silence like she understood that language. Sloane stayed in the hallway watching too long. A frozen smile on her face drew a dangerous conclusion. If that woman ever became important to Noah, Sloane never would. So she chose the cruel shortcut. She went straight for Adrian's open wound. She found him in his office, alone, staring out at the Christmas tree through the window like he was looking at a scene he had no idea how to step into. Sloane lowered her voice, put on an air of concern, and planted the idea as if she were protecting him. She said Claire was getting too attached, that she seemed unstable, that this could confuse Noah and hurt him when she eventually left. Adrian didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched. His breathing got short, like the word hurt landed exactly where she meant it to. When he finally stood up and left the office without a word, Sloane knew she'd done it. The problem was upstairs. Claire still thought the worst part of that night would be saying goodbye, and she had no idea. Someone had already decided her fate. Claire was still in the playroom when she felt the air in the house change. It wasn't tea noise. The Whitmore mansion almost never had noise. It was a different kind of silence, tighter, like when someone walks into a room ready to fight, but trying not to raise their voice. Noah was still on the rug, small hands nudging pieces into place like he could hold the world together if he just finished this picture. Claire fit 2 edge pieces, clicked them together, and for a second let herself hope the day might end with a bit of peace. Then the door swung fully open. Adrian Whitmore filled the doorway. Tall, tense, his jacket still over his arm like he'd stormed out of the office and only now remembered the cold outside. His eyes didn't go to his son first. They went to Claire, and that alone hurt. She knew that look. It wasn't curiosity, or gratitude, or even neutrality. It was judgment. A few steps behind him, Sloane Caldwell stood with perfect posture, like she didn't want to be involved, but also absolutely needed to be there. Noah slowly lifted his face, as if he'd felt the change in the air before he ever looked up. "Claire, we need to talk." Adrian's voice was low, but it cut. Claire wiped her hands on her apron out of habit, rose slowly so she wouldn't startle Noah, and tried to keep her tone normal. "Of course, sir. She didn't get to finish." Adrian stepped in and jerked his chin toward the door, clipped. "Not here." Against her will, Claire glanced at Sloane, a quick look almost begging for some kind of explanation. And all she saw was a tight little smile, like Sloane was saying, "You were never meant to be down, oh." And that rug, out in the hallway, away from the boy, Adrian, and let it out. He told her he'd been informed of inappropriate behavior, that she was confusing Noah, that the bond she was building was dangerous. Blood rushed to Claire's face. Shame first, then anger. Whitmore, I was just doing a puzzle with him." Adrian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The way he carried himself already had the weight of someone who commands entire companies. "You're crossing boundaries. And I can't risk my son's stability." The word stability sounded cruel coming from a man who clearly wasn't stable himself. Claire tried to explain that Noah didn't speak, that she simply respected his silence, that nothing about this was wrong. But it felt like arguing with a locked door. Then came the final blow, clean and brutal. "You're done here, today. Now." Claire blinked, almost sure she'd misheard. The Christmas lights sparkling in every corner of the house turned the whole thing into a bitter joke. Sloane stepped a bit closer, laying a gentle hand on Adrian's arm, and added sweetly, "Maybe this really is the best thing for everyone." Claire didn't beg for a job. Her pride wouldn't let her. But when she went downstairs to grab her bag, she saw Noah at the top of the staircase, frozen, gripping the banister. He didn't cry. He just stared, small body rigid, like he was watching someone leave out again. Claire walked out the front door with the icy wind hitting her face, every step down the stone path feeling like another unwanted goodbye. But before she reached the gate, she felt, not heard, felt a sudden burst of movement inside. The sound of small feet on the stone floor, a stumble, a door banging, and the terrifying idea that Noah wasn't just going to stand there and watch this one slip away. When she pulled her coat tighter and looked back, the snowy garden looked way too big for such a little boy to cross alone. But something in her body already knew he'd started. The gate was only a few yards away when Claire heard it for real this time. A door flung open, fast little footsteps pounding across the stone. She spun round, and her heart gave that free-fall jump that comes right before disaster. In the middle of all those golden Christmas lights, a tiny figure came running, more stumbling than running, with a thin coat thrown over his pajamas. Noah. For a split second, Claire froze, because the sight was so wrong it almost didn't register. A boy that small charging into the snow like he was crossing an ocean. "No, no, no, no." Her voice came out low and desperate, like shouting would only make it worse. She dropped her bag right there on the path and ran back toward him, but he'd already hit a slick patch. His feet flew out. He crashed to his knees, hands sinking into the snow, and got up again without crying. Like crying was a luxury he didn't get anymore. Wine sliced his face, turning his cheeks bright red, hair plastered to his forehead. Claire reached him, dropped to her knees in the snow, and tried to scoop him up, but he pulled back half a step. panting, eyes full of an older fear. The fear that if he let go, she'd vanish. Claire shrugged off her own coat and wrapped it around his small body, pulling him gently against her chest like she was holding something broken. Noah shook, not just from cold. He shook from the inside out. He clung to her shirt with both hands, fingers digging into the fabric, and pressed his face into her neck like someone who had finally found a safe place after being lost too long. Claire closed her eyes for a second and felt the full force of it. This wasn't just a kid with attachment issues. This was a kid in panic. She ran her hand over his back, slow and steady, and spoke right into his ear, making her words into a blanket. "I'm here. I'm right here. You didn't have to. Come out like this, honey." Through the huge front window in the hall, Claire saw shapes moving, people rushing, lights coming on, someone pointing toward the garden. She knew this could blow up, that someone would blame her, that Adrian would decide this was more evidence against her. But with Noah glued to her, shaking like the world might rip everything away again, Claire couldn't make herself step back. She took a deep breath and started walking him back toward the house, carefully, pressing each step into the snow like she could protect every inch of him from the cold and the chaos. And that's when she realized something. In her rush to leave, she'd left the resignation letter exactly where it shouldn't be. And sooner or later, someone in that house was going to pick it up and read what she'd never had the courage to say out loud. Frank Delaney knew that house better than a lot of people who actually lived in it. Head of security, former cop, he had that calm and shocked way of someone who doesn't care about money, only about risk. That Christmas Eve, when he saw the mess in the snow, Claire carrying Noah carefully, the boy gripping her like letting go meant losing everything, Frank didn't join the blame game. He did his job. He cleared a safe path, ordered someone to grab a blanket, warned staff about the ice, and made sure the kid got inside without more damage. Still, as the mansion tried to snap back into its usual fake calm, Frank couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than an overly emotional employee. That's when he noticed something near the service entrance. A bag dropped on the floor, half open, like it had been abandoned mid-step. Beside it, a folded envelope, edges damp from the snow. Frank picked it up carefully, the way you'd pick up evidence before it turned into a weapon in the wrong hands. On the front, written in pen, Claire Dawson. The paper felt heavy, not with threat, but with goodbye. He didn't open it there. Frank wasn't the kind of man who snooped out of curiosity. He just knew that certain loose things have a way of becoming disasters. He went straight to the office. Adrian was inside, alone, pacing, face drawn tight, hands restless, a man trying to decide whether he was angrier at someone else or at fate itself. The mansion was dressed for Christmas, but the mood in that room was anything but festive. It was the air of someone wounded, pretending they were in control. Frank held out the envelope this time. Whitmore found this by the service door. Adrian took the paper but didn't open it right away. He stared at it like it was a question he didn't want to answer. Then, with a short, tense breath, he opened it. Claire's handwriting was steady in some lines and shaky in others, like she'd written while fighting back tears. Adrian read standing by the window, the glow of the tree reflecting in the glass. Line by line, the story he'd decided to believe started to fall apart. Claire wasn't asking for anything. She wasn't accusing anyone. She was explaining that she'd already chosen to leave. Not out of anger, not to manipulate anyone, but because Noah made her chest tighten in a way she could no longer carry. She wrote about the son she'd lost to pneumonia, how Noah's silence mirrored the absence she spent every day dragging behind her. She said she had tried to be strong, but that this huge house and this broken boy kept pulling her back to a place she hadn't healed from. Then came the line that hit Adrian like a punch. Simple, honest, impossible to fake. She was leaving precisely so she wouldn't confuse Noah, so he wouldn't cling to someone who might fall apart on the inside. Adrian read that part twice, searching for some loophole that would let him keep believing the worst. There wasn't one. Shame rose first, then guilt, then a hot anger, not at Claire, but at himself for turning her quiet pain into a filing, an expulsion, a punishment. The word unstable, the one he'd thrown at her so confidently in the hallway, tasted foul now. Frank stayed silent, letting Adrian walk through that alone, just watching the way the man's shoulders sagged under the weight of what he'd done. Life in the mansion went on around them, soft music in some far room, footsteps, silverware clinking. But in the office, time fell stopped. When he finished, Adrian folded the letter slowly, his hands shaking with contained rage. He lifted his eyes just in time to see Sloane Caldwell at the far end of the hall, flawless as ever, to calm for someone who'd just pushed a child to run out into the snow. She held his gaze without blinking, as if she already knew exactly what that letter said, and as if she regretted none of it. Adrian clenched the paper in his fist, jaw tight, and stepped out into the hallway, walking straight toward her like a man who finally sees the trap in full. For the first time that night, Sloane seemed to measure the distance between them like she understood this evening was about to flip upside down. In the middle of the garland-lined hallway, framed by family photos and soft Christmas lights, Adrian stopped just a few feet from Sloane. The house had gone quiet again, but it was a heavy quiet, like even the decorations knew something had snapped. Sloane gave him a small, practiced smile and started in with her gentle voice. Adrian, I only wanted to protect Noah. This time, he didn't swallow it. He raised the folded letter between them at chest height. Did you know she wrote this? Or did you decide to tell me something else? Sloane blinked once, quickly, and her smile lagged, cracking like old makeup. She scrambled for control, reaching for pretty words to cover what she'd done. I just thought the way she was attaching herself to him was odd. Noah is fragile, Adrian. You know that. He let out a short breath through his nose, humorless. My son is fragile, yes? But the one hurting him isn't her. Adrian opened the letter just enough to tap one line with his finger, like it burned. She was leaving on her own, Sloane, to avoid confusing him. And I turned that into a public firing, because you pushed me there. If that hit something inside you, keep that feeling. Too many people only realize who was there out of real care, and who was there out of control, when it is almost too late. Sloane lifted her chin, annoyed that he wasn't bending. She switched tactics, calling him emotional, hinting that he was vulnerable and needed someone rational by his side. That was the moment he saw the full depth of it. She hadn't just lied about Claire. She'd used his grief as a tool. Adrian glanced up the staircase and saw Noah standing there, small and silent, watching like his body already knew another loss was coming. Adrian drew a deep breath, held back the explosion so he wouldn't scare his son, and said with cold clarity, "We're done. You don't live in this house anymore." Sloane's mouth fell open, truly shocked, like the idea of being told to leave was unthinkable. She reached for his arm, still trying to bargain, convinced tone alone could fix anything. Adrian pulled his arm back, firm, and went to Noah instead. He crouched to his son's level, laid a hand gently on his shoulder, and spoke slowly, like he was rebuilding a promise brick by brick. "I'm going to bring Claire back. I'm going to fix what I did." Noah didn't answer, but his fingers loosened on the banister, the smallest sign that those words had found a safe place inside him. Adrian grabbed his coat and keys and walked out without waiting for anyone to manage the situation. Snow still fell outside, soft, covering footprints, blurring pots. Claire could be anywhere by then, at a bus stop, wandering side streets, just trying to breathe far from that mansion. Adrian gripped the steering wheel hard before he even sat down, because this wasn't about pride anymore. It was urgency, and later that same night when he finally found Claire alone in the snow, he was going to learn that asking for forgiveness isn't a pretty sentence. It is a whole scene, and it has to be lived the right way. Adrian drove through quiet streets lined with glowing houses, the snow making everything look more beautiful than it had any right to be. He cracked the window a few times, letting the icy air sting his face, like the cold might help him think straight. He watched bus stops, street lights, any sign of someone moving around out there on a night when most families were locked inside their perfect Christmas. Then he saw her, Claire, huddled near a bus stop, coat pulled tight to her throat, hands tucked into her sleeves, face set in that empty expression people wear when they're holding themselves together by force. She wasn't crying. She just looked drained. He parked carefully and stepped out of the car slowly. No trace of his usual commanding stride. The snow squeaked under his shoes. Claire lifted her head immediately, like an animal that's learned how to recognize danger. When she realized it was Adrian, her body tensed. "If you came to finish the job, it's already done," she said, voice low and rough. More defense than attack. Adrian stopped at a respectful distance, hands visible, like he didn't want to corner her. "Claire, I read your letter." Just that sentence changed the air between them. She understood instantly that he knew. The silence that followed was thick. Adrian swallowed, and the first thing out of his mouth wasn't an excuse. It was a confession. "I was wrong. I humiliated you. I let someone push on the weakest part of me, and I took it out on you." Claire gave a humorless little laugh and shook her head. "You didn't just take it out on me. You took it out on him, too." She tipped her chin toward the car, without turning, just saying no as Mame heard. "That boy didn't run into the snow because he likes me. He ran because he thought he was losing someone again." Adrian closed his eyes for a moment, that sentence landing dead center in his chest. When he opened them, they were wet, but his voice stayed steady. "I know, and I'm not going to pretend we can erase that." Claire drew in a deep breath, and under her anger he could hear pure exhaustion. "I'd already decided to leave before you fired me," she said, all honesty and no drama. "I can't keep burying my own child inside me. When I look at him, I go back to a place I don't want to go." Adrian nodded. There was no argument that could fix that. But he also knew he couldn't walk back into that mansion and pretend Noah was fine without her. "I'm not asking you to come back as staff," he said carefully. "I'm asking you to come back as someone who matters to him, just for tonight. Just long enough for me to fix the part I broke." Claire pressed her lips together, eyes trembling, caught between wanting to say no and desperately wanting to say yes. Headlights cut across them, and the interior of the car lit up enough for her to see a small shape in the back seat. Noah sat there under a blanket, staring out the window without blinking. Seeing his pale face in that glow knocked down the last of her defenses. Adrian took a quick step closer and then stopped himself before reaching for her. "I don't know how to be good at this, Claire. I know how to sign contracts, give orders, put out fires, but I don't know how to reach my own son when he shuts down like that." Claire looked at Noah again, and the decision showed up in her body before it did in her words. She walked slowly to the car. Before getting in, she faced Adrian with a look that drew boundaries without needing a speech. "I'm going for him. But this time you're going to do it right." She opened the back door and slid in beside Noah. The boy didn't speak. He just stretched out one shaking hand and wrapped his fingers around hers, like she was the only solid thing left. Adrian sat behind the wheel with his throat tight, and when the car rolled forward through the snow, Noah turned toward Claire, lifted his fingers to her cheek and touched her face. Gently, like he was checking she was real. His mouth moved, trying to form something. A sound caught in his throat. Claire's heart stopped for a second, because it felt like a word was right there, on the edge. They drove slowly through the white streets, Christmas lights sliding past the windows in shaky little lines of gold. Claire sat in the back with Noah pressed against her, feeling his fingers grip hers like any sudden bump in the road might take everything away again. Adrian drove in silence, eyes on the road and, every so often, on the rearview mirror. Not to monitor, but to check if this was really happening. No one spoke, only the hum of the heater, the crunch of snow under the tires, and Noah's short and even breathing filled the car. Always a breath away from tears, always a breath away from swallowing them. Claire's building was simple. Its narrow hallway smelling like cooking and cheap cleaner. No marble, no grand doors, no perfect life, and yet when she opened her apartment door, the air inside had a warmth the mansion never quite managed. The clang of the radiator, a soft yellow light, a small Christmas tree in the corner with old ornaments, the kind you keep because they hold stories. Adrian stepped inside awkwardly, suddenly feeling too big for the space. He took off his coat carefully. Afraid of bumping into anything, Claire dropped her bag on the couch, grabbed a throw from the armchair, and wrapped it round Noah, who sat quietly, taking everything in like he was being introduced to a new world. "I'm making hot chocolate or coffee. Your choice," she said quietly, more to steady herself than to play hostess. Adrian almost said he didn't need anything, but swallowed the words. He did realize that phrase, "I don't need it," was something he'd used too often, always too late. In the little kitchen, she lit the burner, poured milk into a battered pan. The sound of it hitting the metal, the clink of the spoon, the sweet smell starting to rise. Those small things did more than all the doctors in the world. Noah's shoulders began to loosen, like his body recognized the feeling before his mind did. On the couch, Claire tucked him against her side and blew on the steam over his mug with slow, patient breaths. Adrian sat on the edge of a chair, hands on his knees, watching his son the way you watch a closed door you're scared to knock on. Noah lifted the mug, hands trembling a little, took a tiny sip, then looked up at Claire. It wasn't a regular look. It was the look of someone about to ask for something and not knowing how. He raised his hand again and brushed his fingertips over her cheek, slow, testing warmth and skin and presence. Claire caught his hand, rested her forehead against his for a moment. "I'm here, okay. I'm not disappearing right now." The words were barely above a whisper. Right then, Noah forced something up from deep inside, like he was hauling a sound up from the bottom of a well. His mouth moved once, twice, failed, and tried again. Adrian held his breath, frozen. And then the word came out, small and shaky, but clear enough to cut straight through the night. "Mommy." Claire went absolutely still. For 1 second, the whole world lost its sound. The mug rattled in her hand. She pulled Noah tight against her, like that one word might shatter if she didn't hold on. Adrian couldn't stop himself. His hand flew to his face, as if he could hide the tears, and failed completely. Noah didn't repeat the word. He didn't have to. He just stayed there, breathing deeper now, like that single syllable had unlocked something stuck inside his chest. With his heart burning with gratitude and guilt, Adrian looked at Claire and knew something with painful clarity. He could never again ask her to come back as staff after that word. She had become something else in their story. All that was left was for him to find the courage to say it out loud. After Noah said "Mommy," Claire's small apartment felt almost too full for everything happening at once. She held him against her chest while he relaxed, a little more weight in his body, like he finally trusted the arms that held him. Adrian tried to speak anything, but no sound came. He just stood there with his hand over his mouth, eyes shining, watching as if blinking might make the moment disappear. Noah looked worn out and lighter, like that one word had pulled the stone off his back. Claire wiped her face with the back of her hand, half laughing at her own tears. "It's okay. I'm here," she repeated softly, not as some grand promise, but like solid ground under his feet. Adrian stepped closer, stopping just short of them. I don't even know where to start," he said, voice breaking. "Then start with what matters," Claire answered. Not harsh, but not letting him off the hook either. "Start with Noah, with what he needs. And with the way you shoved me out like I was some kind of threat." Adrian bowed his head. His silence was more honest than any polished speech. He drew a long breath and met her eyes, not as the master of the house, but as a man. "You are not going back to that house as an employee. I don't want that. I want..." He stopped, the words heavy in his throat. It was hard to speak plainly after a lifetime of controlling everything. "I want you to be part of his life, in a way that's worthy of you, with respect, with a choice." Fear flickered in Clara's chest, fear of being swallowed by a world that eats people like her, before she could answer. No, still curled against her, reached one small hand out toward Adrian, without even looking. Like his body wanted a bridge before his mind could get scared again. Adrian slowly got down on his knees in front of the couch and let Noah's hand touch his face. It wasn't a cute, posed gesture. It was the hesitant touch of a child who still wasn't too sure if this person would stay. Adrian cradled that little hand carefully, like it was made of glass. "I'm here, buddy. I'm here," he whispered. Noah didn't answer right away. He just stared, eyes wet, mouth moving like there were words stacked up behind a door. Claire stopped breathing without noticing. Adrian did, too. Nobody filled the silence. Nobody rushed him. Noah leaned his forehead against Claire's for a second, gathering courage, then turned back to his father. The word that came out wasn't perfect. It came with the wobble of someone relearning how to exist in the world. But it came. "Daddy," Adrian's hand shot to his face again, this time because the joy hurt. In that tiny apartment, with a little tree twinkling in the corner, and half-melted snow still clinging to everyone's shoes, his fortune didn't matter at all. No stock, no contract, no mansion could ever buy that sound. Later that same Christmas night, Adrian drove Claire and Noah back to the mansion. Not as an employer picking up an employee, but as a father bringing home the two people who finally made the place feel like a home again. He didn't promise perfection. He promised presence, respect, and time. Claire stepped through the door with Noah in her arms, still feeling the weight of what had happened there. But for the first time, she didn't feel like she was walking in alone. The lights from the big tree reflected in Noah's eyes as he reached out and grabbed both Adrian's hand and hers at the same time, holding tight like he was saying in his own quiet way, "Don't let go." Christmas still shimmered outside, beautiful and cold. But inside that house, something had finally started to thaw. That same Christmas night, Adrian learned the hardest way possible. No amount of money can control a child's silence. Money could boss people round, could sign papers, could rebuild companies, but for a few minutes. He believed it could dictate what his son felt too, until he saw Noah sprinting into the snow, terrified of being left behind again. And Claire didn't come back because she was talked into it. She came back because a little boy finally asked, in the only way he knew how. When he said "Mommy," it wasn't just a word. It was a warning that if they messed this up again, there might not be another chance. What about you? If you were Claire, would you have gone back? If you were Adrian, would you have had the courage to admit you'd been manipulated and tried to fix it that same night? Tell me in the comments which moment hit you hardest. If this story really got to you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because round here, we don't just tell stories to pass the time. We tell stories that remind us of something powerful. Sometimes the real miracle at Christmas isn't a grand gesture. It is the code. Your urge to say I was wrong and hold tight to the people who still choose to stay.